Hello and welcome to the Artist Collective radio show. I'm your host, Shoshana Pearson. In this week's episode, I have for you visual artist Jennifer Morgan. Jennifer has been living off of the income from her artwork for the past 20 years. In this episode, we talk about the entrepreneurial spirit it takes for artists to make it as a career, the serendipitous events to watch for when becoming an artist, and how it takes a community of people surrounding you to keep you going sometimes. Jennifer is taking time from her holiday down in Mexico, where there's currently a thunderstorm happening for her, while I'm up here in Dallas with a thunderstorm of my own. So if you hear thunders and see flashes of light, that's what's happening on both ends. But thank you so much for joining us today on the Artist Collective radio show. Please like, subscribe, follow, and let's go now to Jennifer and see how that storm is faring down in Mexico. Thank you, Jennifer, so much for joining me today on the Artist Collective radio show. I'm so excited to see you. So excited that you could take some time from your travel schedule. You're out in Mexico right now. And thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and chat with me about life and art.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on your show, Shoshana. I'm really excited.
Absolutely. How's it going down in Mexico? Are you there for business or pleasure or both?
Mostly pleasure. It's kind of a birthday situation for me and my mom, and a friend offered me a place for a month. So I just jumped on it because I can always work from here for the most part. I mean, not painting, but all the other stuff. So
all the other stuff that goes into the artist life, which I definitely want to talk to you about, because I think that's what this show is about. It's about balancing the two different sides of the sword, if you will. But let's talk first about how you got started as an artist. You went to school for art, but what was your interest in it before you started college? Did you know that you always wanted to be an artist, or was it something that came to you while you were in school? Tell me about that, the beginning, the origin story.
Okay. I think that it's always been something that's innate in me. I've always had the ability to draw. I always loved it. I was always pretty good at it. You know, up through elementary school, I was winning drawing contests and things like that. And art was always my favorite class. And in high school, you know, I started painting clothes and jackets and selling them in boutiques, you know, kind of the same thing I'm doing now, but on a different scale.
Yeah.
But when it got time to go to college, I didn't want to get an art degree because it doesn't have a lot of flexibility as far as what I knew back then. You know, your options weren't a lot. And so I went for graphic design with a minor in marketing. And then I just packed my schedule full of all the painting classes and things like that I loved. And that's actually where I found my mentor, who ended up being the assistant dean of the art department at UNT. But him and his wife were big supporters of my work and telling me that I needed to paint and really follow that. And so I ended up kind of setting myself up because I had a degree in graphic design and marketing. And then I already kind of had the skills, and they helped me hone things. And so I could promote and sell my own work. You know, it's a big deal to be able to make all your presentations, do your own website, things like that. And I think that kind of slows a lot of artists down sometimes in promoting themselves.
Absolutely. That's actually something that I hear a lot on the show, is that self-promotion is really hard for people to do. So tell me why it feels comfortable for you to do it for yourself, because you've been trained to do it, but were you intending to do it for yourself or other people? And how did that sort of bridge get crossed internally, not so much externally, but how did you come to peace with that, I think, if you will?
Yeah. Well, I think that, one thing of being able to like build things graphically and digitally
Mm-hmm.
and share them is a little bit easier for me than selling my work. I don't like being a salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, that's why a lot of galleries have agents and I mean, artists have galleries and agents and things like that to handle the business aspect of things, you know. And that's something I still don't like to this day. Like I would rather pay someone a commission to do all that kind of stuff. But I do like before, the past couple of years and what's happened in the world. I love delivering pieces to my clients' homes and going in and hanging it for them, and that was a really fun experience. I just don't really like the sales part of it. But as far as to do graphically, that's I'm fine with that. Like it's fun.
Tell me a little bit more about how much you enjoyed the delivery aspect and meeting the people. Why was that the thing that made you light up when you were talking about it just now? Tell me about
You
that.
know, I think that's one of the reasons I like to travel. I see other cultures. I like to see how people live, what they eat. And when you arrive at someone's house with the painting that they've bought, they welcome you with open arms. I've had people, and they give you the tour of their home and their art collection. And some of them want you to stay for dinner, open nice bottles of wine, and tell you great stories. And they want to hear yours. And it's been a really great bonding experience, like with my clients. And it's just, I don't know, I kind of like to see, like I said, how people live and what their houses look like.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. It's such a like a community sort of relational aspect that I don't hear from a lot of artists. I feel like there's a lot of artists that kind of they're more introverted and they like to, they do their work and they post them, share them and that sort of thing. So I like that is an aspect that is part of your work is delivering and community and relational. And I'm sure that informs your pieces too. And do you think about who could be on the receiving end of your work when you are in the process of creating a new piece? Or does it tell me about your process of how you come up with the new works and
Yeah.
series?
Well, rarely I think about the clients because I think that you can never predict anything like that. I've had exhibitions where, I put a piece up that I wasn't crazy about in the show and, ended up like taking it down. And then the place that was hosting was like, put it up, just leave it up, just leave it up. It's really great. Like had my doubts. But the piece that I put on the invitation that I thought was the best, strongest one, I ended up having it for like 2 or 3 years. No one bought it. The piece that I took down and put back up, they could have sold it 3 times that night. And I was just like, that to me is an example of you can never predict what people want. And I also think that as a creator and as artists, we should never try to predict what people want. Because we are creating from an honest space, which is our heart, our observances, or people's stories, or we're holding a mirror up to society, we're trying to make a statement and things like that. And to me, that's what anyone who's buying work connects with, is the message that you're trying to convey visually or how it makes them feel. And to me, like, you can never really predict that or try, and you probably shouldn't. So
Yeah, that's great. When you work on a series, because you have on your website, you have your work sort of separated out into different series at different times. Are you thinking of one particular feeling for the series, or one particular message you want to convey, or one story you want to convey through that series? Or is each piece individual and they just kind of happen to have a similar theme. Or tell me how you sort of separate that or organize it. I think is a better word, organize.
Yeah. Well, I think my first series is really different from the things I've created later on in my career, but that was also the work that I started in college. And it was very narrative, very graphic. I also feel like that was a way for me to process a lot of things that had happened to me. It was almost like a visual diary of experiences. And I felt like it was very therapeutic for me because I believe in transference and sitting down and thinking about maybe experiences and then turning them into something beautiful or good, and then, processing things that way. As I felt like I wanted to move forward with other ideas that I had, I started working with, because I've always loved animals, and that's where the animal series came in, where I felt like we needed to see more intimate portraits of different animals. I loved learning about the different species as I was going through that. I just don't think humankind gives animals enough credit, and that more attention and respect should be given to other living things on the planet. For the most part. And so it's just something that I was trying to bring to the forefront of people's minds, was that kind of recognition of that. So it opened up, I could open up the narrative about it. It was actually based on an excerpt from a book written by Henry Weston called The Outermost House. He was a naturalist in the early 1900s. The outermost house on the great beaches of Cape Cod. And there's this excerpt from that book that just articulates everything I felt in my heart. And it's basically what I told you about us not, understanding animals and treating them with more as fellow, there's a line that says, as fellow prisoners in the beauty and travail of like this earth and this time and all of this. It's really beautiful. I can't recite it off the top of my tongue.
But it spoke to you enough to where you created an entire series based out of reaching for that beauty and travail of nature.
Yeah. And the life that we have with all of these other creatures on this planet, part of it is that they live by voices we never hear. They see things that we never see. And you just think about all the things that animals can do that are so beyond the human scope. Yeah. Traveling around the world, like even whale sharks, they can migrate around the whole planet, in a year, which is nuts. Yeah.
So what do you get out of it then when you create these works with stories behind them, and you're trying to bring them more to the forefront of people's minds, so the rest of us are more aware or more sensitive to animals' impacts on our world and our lives? How does it affect you to be able to communicate in that way? Is there, you spoke about the transference and the kind of the healing of the first series. Do you find that with the second series as well? Is that just something that runs through all of them?
Yeah, I think that that's a constant in the creation process. My studio has always been a safe place. And if something happens in the world and I get hurt, I always go there and just hole up and cut the world off and create. And it's very, like I said, going back to that word, therapeutic for me.
Yeah.
I feel like I get that same thing through the animal series, where I can almost, like, it gives me an excuse to open up a dialogue, but it also gives animals a voice. And a lot of times when I have shows with that work, I donate a certain amount to an animal charity and things like that. So I try and also support it in a month when I can.
Mm-hmm. And so your series now is not as mammalian. It's geometric. So you have an example behind you.
Yeah.
Right. So tell me how those flow in together. Is this a complete different viewpoint or feeling, or what are you going with, or what is driving this series?
I think it's also being that I've been a full-time creator for 20 years. You grow and change as a person. And so therefore your work is going to grow and change. And for me, I've always wanted to venture into the abstract. All the work starts out abstract anyway. Like when I do any of the other series, I'm always building images in a foreground on top of an abstract background. So my whole time in the studio, I've always looked at some of these backgrounds like, oh, these are great. You should just leave it like that, or not put anything on it. But it's like, okay, I have a show. I've got to do stuff. But I got some time to experiment in the studio. I started working on loose canvas with these abstract pieces where I could put a whole wall of canvas up and just start, with no concept in mind, just like totally tapping into emotion and feeling and what feels good, and see where that came from, and then start honing in on areas that I think are interesting, seeing things and working with that. But it also didn't constrict me to a certain size. I was working on predetermined, pre-stretched canvases before that. And so it's been really fun to, I don't know, go almost as big as I want, and find little areas that I think are great, cut them out of the canvas and stretch them. And I'm like, that's perfect. It's an interesting way to create where, to me, you're not toiling over something so much. It's more just flowing out of you instead of overthinking. You can overthink, and that takes, that can ruin pieces.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it happens to a lot of us, and it's, a challenge for a lot of us creators to not overthink it, to just, be spontaneous and to go with what you're feeling. The thing that I noticed about your new series too is that it's a juxtaposition, and I love juxtapositions. So it's a real soft muted, most of them have real soft muted backgrounds with these really sharp, clearly defined geometric shapes overlaid, and you can see some of the examples behind you, which I love, because I feel like that's kind of, the dichotomy that we tend to wear, especially as women. We're sharp and strong and soft and muted and gentle all at the same time. So I do you have, I don't want to feminize it, but I like that juxtaposition of how you are integrating both sides of the self.
It's true. I love that comparison, because it is true. We have to be, these soft and nurturing and sensitive, but yet we do have to be strong. I mean, we live in a patriarchy, and so there's a lot of things that there's certain groups of people don't have control over, because we're not the ones making the decisions for the most part, of the ones in power of certain things. But the soft painterly backgrounds of the abstracts, to me, are the more thoughtless parts. I don't want to say thoughtless. They come more from emotion and just movement and things like that. And when I can hone in and start putting the geometric things in, I have to start putting a lot more thought and trying not to overthink it, but kind of honing in on the piece a little more with my thought process. Like, I listen to audiobooks and music a lot when I work, because I'm trying to I'm trying to occupy a certain part of my mind and tap into something that's not so, I don't want to say logical, but it's a little, somewhere else, emotional.
Yeah. Do you find that your painting is empowering for you?
Oh, 100%, Shoshana. I look at the way, not just that it's allowed me to be my own boss, make my decisions, but I've seen the way that being an artist or creator also opens doors. You can circulate through all different kinds of circles. I'll meet people and they find out that you're an artist and they're business people, they're CEOs, they're this, but they're like, oh, really? You do? Let me see this. And they like people, you can sit down and have a conversation with anybody because most people are interested in what people create as far as art or books or poetry, things like that. And I think it's opened a lot of doors in that way. I've met a lot of really amazing people that I probably wouldn't have met otherwise, not just in my clients, but just in my travels, For most people, you automatically become more interesting if you're a painter or, a creator.
Yeah, because it's rare and it's hard to do. And it takes a special someone to pursue it wholeheartedly and full time. And so it's not for the faint of heart. So I think that it is mysterious to people who don't have that inclination. It becomes mysterious in the same way that, I don't know, being a doctor is mysterious to me. It's just, it's an interesting superpower, if you will.
And I've met people that are highly successful, and some of my clients, their jobs are high powered, high stress, and they're just like, wow, how do you do that? I've always been really amazed that you can just come up with stuff. And it's like, well, I'm amazed that you can juggle all these numbers and legal speak or, whatever. Like, I could never do that. But to me, it just lends itself to everybody's wired different. We all bring different gifts to the table. And I love that.
Yeah. But you're also a businesswoman. You were starting even in high school, you said. And so tell me how you balance those different sides of yourself, the businesswoman that has to do the web design and the pricing your work and the promoting and the selling. And do you have people to do that for you, or are you involved in all of that? And how do you balance that with creating?
I am involved in all of that. I don't have people that do that for me. And usually when I sit down to do all the things I don't like doing about my job, that's when it's work. And you just put on that hat and you're like, okay, I'm going to sit down from 10 a.m. till it's done and, whatever it takes. But just like any task, I think, but then it becomes a task, I think that most people have things about their jobs they don't like. And the best thing, if you're available, is farm it out to somebody that's really good. But the way that, I also think that preparing someone to photograph and document and do all the work, for me, I might as well do it myself because I know how to do it. By the time I write down all the dimensions and the mediums and the titles and photograph it, it's like, I've already done most of the work by the time I hand it over to someone to plug in.
Yeah. So I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and plus, being self-employed and making a living off your art for 20 years, your income, you're not getting a check every 2 weeks. You're not, your income really fluctuates. And so to have an employee depend on you, unless you've got a pretty solid operation running, which I know artists that do, and they can hire people and it's steady and all of that. That's not my case.
I think it's not the case for most. So
Yeah.
rare jewels there. But so there were a lot of tricks or tools that I've learned about my particular field since the pandemic. How did the pandemic shift how you do your business, how you run your work? How
Mhm.
has it changed? What changes are you hoping to keep, and which ones are you looking forward to the day that you can get rid of them again?
Yeah. Well, for me, Shoshana, not much changed during pandemic besides maybe not feeling creative. Um, I had a lot of anxiety and things like that going on because I live in a big building, I didn't know what's going on. I live across from uh, a hot spot for protests, and so there was always protests outside and things going on, and it was a little bit heavy,
Yeah.
for a
Yeah.
while. But as far as the creation process of my business, I thought for sure I would be fine during isolation, even living and working in my home for 20 years, because that's what I've been doing my whole life. It made me realize how much I depend on my dinners with friends, hugging
Mm-hmm.
people, traveling, for those
Mm-hmm.
breaks and recharging inspiration and things like that. So I can't imagine how hard it was for people who didn't have that kind of experience or tolerance already, because
Mm.
I thought for me as a seasoned pro of isolating for my job most of the time and
Yeah.
working alone, it wouldn't it wouldn't be that hard, you know. But I don't think that I really changed much for COVID besides not having exhibitions.
You said it affected your creativity because you were experiencing a lot of anxiety. How did you process that, work through that? Are you still processing and working through it? Has it subsided? How is that informed what you're working on now?
Well, I did get several commissions through that process, which forced me to get in the studio and create. And once I got into it, I was really glad that I had that motivation.
Yeah.
I didn't really handle the isolation and quarantine well. I should have been probably doing yoga and things like that.
Yeah, me too.
But I ended up, eating chocolate and drinking wine. More than
Whatever
I
it
should have.
takes to get through it. Okay. Okay. Be nice to yourself. Whatever it takes. It was really hard for all of us.
Yeah. And I that's what I said. I was like, just get through this. You'll figure it out. You'll lose the weight. You'll get healthy. You'll stop drinking. All of that. And I have. It's been a lot of fun getting back to myself. And it was an interesting experience. But I think that, living a life where I've been up against depression a lot and things like that, it wasn't too far off from some of the bouts I've been through in my life. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I should say that out loud, but
No, please
we all
do.
have struggles.
Yeah. And I think that it's important to talk about that stuff because I think, when you're struggling like that, you feel really alone and like you're the only one that could ever feel this bad because everybody else looks like they're handling it
Yeah.
or dealing with it. And I know the times that I've felt that way, it's very isolating and I just like withdraw farther and farther and farther. And I think that it's important to talk about how it is a common struggle, particularly for creatives, that that we spend so much time on our own doing our own thing, creating our own from ourselves, that we forget that there's other people that feel and experience significantly like we do. So please share some of your experiences like that and how you manage or deal with them, or how it informs your art. How does it make you a better artist, a better professional?
Yeah, well, I think that sadness informs a lot of creative people. I mean, some of the best songs come out of love and heartbreak, and probably some of the best paintings are muses and tragedy. And so I think that that's a common theme through, like you were saying, a lot of creators. I think a lot of creators, at least, I think there's a lot of creators that are empaths, maybe compassionate. I don't know about that across the board as I start thinking about what I was saying just then, but maybe you have a higher percentage of empaths and creative fields, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure.
I mean, I would definitely say that creatives are certainly more sensitive to certain energy flows or different dynamics from different aspects, and different creatives are, more in tune to, certain things than others. But tell me when you realized that you were going to be a full-time artist and that this was going to be your career and you weren't going to have to, I don't know, sling hot dogs or whatever. I don't know, work another thing. When did it become clear that you were going to be able to make a living from this?
It was touch and go, of course, at first. That's why I think I accidentally set myself up, because as in graphic design field, you can freelance. So you don't have to have a 40-hour work week. So I could work when I needed to and then work on my art.
Mm-hmm.
In one of the art marketing books I read in 1999, it said that, and I'm sure these statistics have changed by then, but when I first started, it said that 83% of people had never been in an art gallery. That really only 17% of the population,
wow,
had been in an art gallery. And this is, a little over 20 years ago. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to target the 83%. And I just started building up a body of work, and then I would find a place to hang it, whether it was a coffee shop, a hair salon, a boutique. I was trying to pick restaurants, I was trying to pick kind of higher end places, and they just started selling. And so I would put a body of work somewhere and then go back and create another body of work and put it somewhere else. And then, at one point I had it in 4 or 5 different places in Dallas, trying to start out. And I would see people, they're like, everywhere I go, I see your work. And it's like, great. Like that's the point, is I'm trying to get in front of people and create that recognizability. And I think that's what also helped me early on, was that it's hard. I carried around a book, this is before the digital age, of pictures of all my paintings. And so anyone that could ask, I could pull it out and show them and give them a business card. I had a website early on, which was really expensive at first, but because it was having to be updated, every 3 or 4 months. It was always out of date. But I look at, when I renew my web address, I've had it for 20 years. And it's like, I think that was a big deal, was having a web presence early on.
Yeah.
And I had just started freelancing and trying to get my work out there. And I got to the point where, I was selling 1 or 2 paintings a month. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to save up enough to live on for 6 months without selling a painting. And I was getting to where I was continually selling almost a painting a week with what I had created and what was out there. So I just made the leap and quit my job and said, okay, well, I've got 6 months backup. If this starts going down, I'll just go back to freelancing and try again. And it ended up working. I got into a furniture boutique on McKinney Avenue in Uptown. And they were interior designers, and they did all this custom furniture. And by the end of our partnership, they sold probably about 2,000 paintings for me.
Wow.
And that was me just walking in there saying, hey, I think you guys should, they didn't have anything on the wall. Why don't you guys try my work? And he's like, well, leave like 3 of them here. I'll see how it goes. And I was like, okay. And he called me the next day. He goes, I sold all 3 of them. Bring me everything you have. And that's how that started. But so much, I think, in my career is seeing a place, walking in, meeting the owner. Hey, do y'all show, just constantly on the lookout for the space, the need, the opportunity, and seizing that. But,
that's an incredible boldness, I think.
Yeah. And I guess that's why I don't like to sell my work. I don't mind going in and finding the places I want it to be. It's just the actual like money transaction I don't like, I guess, or the salesmanship of it. I can sell myself when it comes to like getting in somewhere. That's fine for me. And I've had other kind of weird things happen, like at Richard Haler's salon. It was over on Sherry Lane. And then like several years later, I saw that he had the salon in Neiman Marcus downtown. And so I was like, oh, I should call them and see if they want to show my work again. And I went home and I called them the next day and they were like, oh, did the manager call you? And I was like, no, I was calling to talk to the manager. And he said, wait, she didn't call you? Why are you calling? And I was like, well, I was hoping that you guys might show my work again in your new location. And he said, we had a meeting this morning and we talked about getting your work in here and she was supposed to call you.
Oh my gosh.
And so
I'm getting chills. That's crazy.
And I feel like there's been some things like that that are really serendipitous to me, that are affirmations that I'm on the right path and paying attention to the things that are being put in front of me and acting on it. So,
yeah. How important is that to you, to what you do? That serendipity, kismet.
Yeah, like I love those kinds of coincidences, if that's what it is. To me, it's affirmation that maybe you're on the right path, you're doing what you're made to do. I just really love when that stuff happens. It's like I said, going back to the affirmation thing. And I think that there's signs and things around us all the time. And that's why it's really important to remain present. So you can recognize and see those things and not be somewhere far off in your head all the time, worrying or anxious or, whatever, like to really be here and now.
Yeah, I think and I think as artists, sometimes those mysterious affirmations sometimes even carry us farther than, our friends giving us great positive feedback, which we also love and need, but like having the universe sort of look out for us and say, you're doing the right thing, keep going. It makes us feel like what we're doing is somehow connecting to a larger thing and is important to more than just us and our community, but maybe actually is helping humanity. At least I think so. I feel that way, that those little serendipitous things are so important. And I've worked in things where I feel like it doesn't feel right because I'm not getting any of that feedback. And sometimes you still have to slog through it just for some sort of learning experience. But when you do get those little nods, like it sure helps.
It does.
Yeah.
And also, I love telling those stories because they're so wild. To me, that's just wild. Like, what is that? Is that ESP? Is that a consciousness? Is that, I don't know. Where's that come from? I'm interested in all that.
It is very interesting. And well, I'm thinking from my perspective, you said that first store sold 2,000 of your pieces. And I'm thinking that's a lot. That's a lot of work.
Yeah. And, probably for the first at least 15 years, of my career. I treated it like a full-time job. I was in the studio 40 hours a week, max, plus. And I would usually work straight for 3 months and then take a month off and go travel and get inspired and rest and things like that. So I did create, and plus they were selling it. So I'm like, okay, I've got to create because whatever I'm creating, they're selling it.
There's demand. Let's meet it. Yeah.
And I was having a lot of fun. I was really loving the whole process. And so I didn't know how long it would last. And so I just put my head down and I said, I'm going to work as hard as I can until this wave crashes or whatever. And then that's really when I got the opportunity to kind of reevaluate and start changing directions when that slowed down some, because, I was just trying to keep up for a long time, which is a great gift. It was a really great gift. It allowed me to meet a lot of people and opened a lot of doors for me.
Mm-hmm. It also explains why there was a long period of time where I didn't see you, and people were like, "Does she still live here?" Oh, wow! Your nose is to the grindstone, and you were working. Working. How is it different for you now? What do you do now that's different from then? You travel more, take more time off, or?
I have been. I live at Southside on Lamar, and there's a community gallery in the building called the Jeanette Kennedy Gallery. And the owner of the building asked me to manage and curate the gallery a few years ago. Oh, okay. And so that was, it's really fun. I love doing it. It was a nice break for me because all in all, I've probably created about 3,000 pieces in the past 20 years. But it was getting really heavy depending on my art for everything. For everything that I needed to sustain me, I had to make something for it, which I guess everybody does, they have to work. But, when it comes to art, it was just becoming more work in the studio than it had been before. And so being able to run this gallery has taken some bit of pressure off me. And I welcomed it the first year or so where I could just kind of take a break, paint when I wanted to, paint when I was feeling it, and things like that. And I'm really excited now to get back in the studio. Like I feel like I'm all rested and ready to move forward again. But I still love running the art gallery. It works on an application basis. It's really designed to empower and nurture the art community. And it's a beautiful space in Southside. And I think that there's not a lot of opportunities out there for artists like that, where they can have a solo exhibition for their resume or to photograph their work or to invite gallerists to see their work in a all together like a collection like that. So I'm really passionate about that and I'm thankful for the opportunity. I was just gonna say, I'm looking forward to getting back in the studio and creating a lot more work in the next year, though.
That's great. That's excellent. It seems like it's kind of come full circle, where you can give back in a way, in a mentor type way, that some of the opportunities that you have gotten, and now you also got to carry on with your own work and all that stuff. Well, I think that's all I have for you. I've enjoyed our conversation. Is there anything else you want to add? Anything else that you're working on or toward, or anything that we should look forward to from you? Anything else you want to add before we sign off here?
I would just like to add that I feel like, at the risk of sounding cheesy, I really feel like people should think about what they're passionate about, what they're created to do, and try and follow that. Like, I know it's risky and it's hard and it's scary, but if you're on the right path and you're being pragmatic about your decisions and your steps, I feel like you'll be taken care of. And it's a hard thing for people to grasp, because it is a lot of insecurity. And I think the risk is worth it. And so I would encourage people, if they're thinking about it, to give it a go. And the worst thing that can happen is failure, and you can learn from it and try again later.
And what tips would you offer to somebody who is considering giving up their day job to get into it, or is faced with all this fear of pursuing that passion? What kind of advice would you give to somebody to keep them moving forward?
I would say to work really hard, take a period of time and work really hard. Get all of your ducks in a row, set up everything you need while you have income. And if that takes working nights for 6 months or whatever, to do that, to save up enough money to live on, and give it a shot. I just think the important thing is to make sure that, like they said, you have everything in place and a big cushion before you take that jump. Don't just quit your job, I'm gonna do this, and run off. It's like, because when I quit my first job, I didn't have things in place. I didn't have my business cards. I didn't have certain things. And I went back to freelancing, like, okay, I need to really have some things set up first. So that's what I would do.
And why do you think it's so important that people jump and follow their passion?
Because I think it's something that anybody that I've talked to that's become a full-time artist or given it a shot, it's a nagging thing. It's like they never know unless they try. And it's something that I think people will have regrets. I think that people will look back and think, well, what if I could have been great at this, or I could have been this, but I never tried. And I think it's important to try and live your life to minimize regrets. But it can, I guess, work the other way too. If you regret taking that risk, I don't know.
Maybe you just have to weigh the regrets and see which is going to be something I regret more, not doing it or doing it.
Right. And people have different obligations. Like I've lived my whole adult life single with no children. And so I have a little bit more flexibility to take risks where I'm not supporting a family and things like that. So,
because it can be scary, but in my experience, you kind of have to go all in, heart and mind. Otherwise, it's always just halfway, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and it's hard to get anywhere on 1 foot.
Yeah.
So with that nice little bow.
Right.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your, fancy Mexico birthday holiday down there, and creating to sit with me and to talk and to share your heart and your journey a little bit. And thank you for sharing it with the community at large, who I know there's a lot of people who are struggling with pursuing art, or just need to know that they're not in this alone. And so I appreciate you taking the time to get that message out, and that and overall, that if you keep working and you keep moving forward, that you can be successful, because you are living the dream, and you are successful at being an artist and living off of your art. So thank you for that example. Really.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me on your show. I really appreciate what you're doing, and interviewing artists and creators and getting their stories out there. This is a great project, and I'm honored to be a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who are watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast. We're so glad that you are here to join us on our journey and our conversations about life and art. And please like and subscribe, follow, and share with your friends if you like it too. Somebody else out there who needs a community of artists who are living the dream. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Artist Collective Radio Show. We'll see you next time.
Bye.